For 20 years, the monster of Florence claimed 16 lives in Italy, and he was never captured. Who was the monster of Florence? In this video, we will dissect the fatal errors of the investigation, and the technical details that were ignored for decades. But before we dive into the shadows, we must ask, who were the victims? September 14, 1974, Pasquale Gentilecore and Stefania Pettini were found dead on an isolated road by Pietro de Felice, a farmer passing through the area. Pasquale was in the driver's seat when he was targeted with several shots from a .22 caliber Beretta pistol. Stefania was shot and dragged out of the car by the killer, and while she was agonizing, or already dead, she was stabbed 96 times. The wounds were concentrated mainly in the breast and pubic regions. The killer also inserted a pine branch into her vagina. The murder weapon? A .22 caliber Beretta pistol. Who were Pasquale Gentilecore and Stefania Pettini? Pasquale was 19 years old. He worked as an administrative employee at the Cassa di Risparmio di Firenze, a local bank. He was described as a hardworking young man who loved cars and music. Stefania was 18. Considered beautiful and cheerful by everyone who knew her, she worked as a secretary at a clothing company in Borgo San Lorenzo shortly before her death. Stefania mentioned to a friend that a man was following her, but she never revealed the identity of the stalker. Pasquale was in the driver's seat when he was hit by 5 shots to the chest and neck. An instantaneous death. This demonstrates that for the killer, Pasquale was just an obstacle to be quickly eliminated. While Stefania was inside the car, she was targeted with 3 shots in non-fatal areas. She was found 3 to 5 meters from the car, in a supine position. Defensive wounds were found on her hands and arms. These wounds prove she was fighting for her life until she succumbed. But this was not the only attack. Between the years 1974 and 1981, the monster stopped his attacks. After 7 years, on June 6, 1981, he struck again, killing Giovanni Foggi, 30 years old, and Carmela Di Nuccio, 21 years old, but this time, it was different. He cut out Carmela's pubis, and took it, as a trophy, after only 4 months, on October 22, 1981. The killer claimed Susanna Cambi and Stefano Baldi. On June 19, 1982, the monster attacked Antonella Migliorini and Paolo Minardi, but this time, he made a mistake. He did not kill the male partner instantly. Paolo resisted the first shots and tried to flee with the car. Wounded, he crossed the road, but fell into a ditch on the other side. The killer, afraid of being discovered, approached the car and shot the tires. He shot the couple again, then took and threw away the car keys. To make sure the car could not leave, Paolo was taken to the hospital, but died a few hours later, without giving information. On September 9, 1983, the monster made new victims. After shooting and approaching to perform the mutilations on the woman, he realized they were 2 men, and did nothing. He simply turned his back, and walked away. The victims were Horst Meyer and Jens-Uwe Rush. Why did he kill 2 men this time? Well, Jens-Uwe Rush had long blonde hair, and a physical appearance that, under the dim light of night, made him look like a woman. The killer confused him with a woman, his true target. And without her, there was no reason to mutilate. On July 29, 1984, the monster struck again. Pia Rantini and Claudio Stefanacci were executed inside their car with the same pistol. Pia tried to run, but she was shot in the back and then the head. The killer then performed his most brutal mutilation, removing both her pubis and her left breast. Claudio, already dead, was stabbed 10 times as a final act of rage. 1985, the killer attacked again, and for the last time, but this time, it was very different. The victims: Nadine Mauriat, 36 years old, and Jean-Michel Crevequevillai, 25 years old, a French tourist couple, were not in a car. They were camped in a canvas tent in the middle of the Scopiti forest. They were sleeping when the monster began cutting the canvas with a knife. They wake up, and the monster began to shoot. Nadine was killed, while still in her sleeping bag. Jean, wounded, began to flee. The monster pursued him through the forest, finished him off with the knife, and hid the body under bushes. The monster then returned to Nadine, and began to perform the mutilations. He removed the pubis, and, different from other times, he cut off the left breast. and send it to the police, with a letter, demonstrating arrogance and confidence that the police would never catch him. During the long years of investigation, several people were arrested for these crimes. The most notorious was Pietro Pacciani, a local farmer with a history of extreme violence. In 1994, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. However, in a dramatic turn of events, he was acquitted on appeal in 1996 due to a total lack of forensic evidence. Pacciani died in 1998. Still surrounded by mystery, while the legal system struggled to prove he was the monster. Why did he do it? The FBI analysis suggests something simple and cruel. He was a lonely man who hated women. He didn't feel pleasure in normal sex. For him, pleasure came from destroying the female body. He went from someone who just watched from the bushes, to someone who attacked. How did he go unnoticed? In Florence, because of conservative values, there was a strong culture of stalkers called voyeurism, the practice of feeling pleasure in watching others have sex. He was just another shadow, in the bushes. What were the investigation's core errors? There were 5 major failures that allowed the killer to remain in the shadows. Error 1. The Sardinian fixation. The police became obsessed with a 1968 crime committed with the same weapon as the monster. They linked the gun to a clan of Sardinian immigrants living in Tuscany. However, this only proved that the weapon had changed hands over the years. While the police were busy arresting and interrogating clan members, the monster never stopped killing. Error 2. Data overload and scene contamination. The Squadra Antimostro began crossing data on thousands of individuals with violent pasts. While this generated a massive list of suspects, it produced almost no forensic evidence. Furthermore, the crime scenes were consistently contaminated by onlookers and reporters, destroying vital clues before they could be analyzed. Error 3. The profile mismatch. The error here is logical. Pacciani was a rough man, a peasant. The mutilations done by the monster required a knowledge of anatomy that Pacciani simply didn't have. He wouldn't know where to cut to remove organs with that kind of precision, especially in the dark. Error 4. Unreliable witnesses. The arrests of Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lotti were built on a house of cards. Their convictions relied almost entirely on the testimony of Lotti, a man described as having a low IQ, who frequently changed his story during interrogations. Despite this, both were convicted as accomplices. Error 5. The overlooked professional. The case of Giampiero Vigilante. He was ex-military, had a documented history of violence, owned a weapon of the same caliber, and actually knew Pacciani. Yet, because the police were so obsessed with Pacciani, they completely neglected a suspect who actually possessed the military training the monster clearly displayed. But, are there even deeper details that the police chose to ignore? There are 4 critical details the police ignored. For decades, the investigation focused on who, instead of how. Detail 1. The surgical precision. All attacks and mutilations occurred during pitch-black nights. To believe a man like Pietro Pacciani could perform surgical-grade mutilations in total darkness is absurd. This points towards someone with advanced military training or extensive experience in night hunting. Detail 2. The signature. The weapon used Winchester Series H ammunition, which had been out of production for years before the crimes. The killer used the same specific batch of ammunition for 17 years. This suggests the perpetrator either stole a massive stockpile from a military arsenal, or was a meticulous collector who knew exactly how to preserve rounds to prevent oxidation. Detail 3. The escape. The police assumed the monster lived near the crime scenes. However, the killer consistently vanished through guarded routes, or roads closed to the public. This indicates the monster could have been someone involved in the search parties, or someone who drove a vehicle that no one dared to stop, such as a police officer, a soldier, or a doctor. Detail 4. The marksman. The monster fired at victims in both moving and stationary cars, maintaining a hit rate of nearly 100%. The pistol used had very little stopping power. To incapacitate a victim instantly, he had to hit precise kill zones, like the spine, the head, or the neck. Pacciani, on the other hand, was known to be a mediocre shooter at best. The murders stopped in 1985. Pacciani was convicted and died in 1998. Vanni and Lotti were convicted as accomplices, but the case remains open. The killer could have been a silent neighbor, a doctor, or a veteran soldier, and perhaps we will never know who he really was. Support the channel by checking the link in the comments. Like, subscribe, and tell me your theory below. Let's solve this together.